Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verse 9 through 12. We'll be talking about friends. But no, first of all, it's exciting to see Caden get up here and fill in for his dad. But he also gave me a topic for my next week's sermon, humility. I was going to say something about a bull, but I think I'll leave that alone because it's kind of like kind of like Samson. We don't want him to cut that because he played a great game. In fact, Brady played a great game. I'll tell you make one great example up there. I thought that. But our boys played a fantastic game Friday night. It's exciting to watch them. It's always fun to see your hometown team get a part of the head that they put in the kids. Get them some playing time. And then watch them score too. I had a good feeling about the game when we kicked off the Beaver and the second, third play of the game, I think. We scored safety against them. It kind of reminds me of the Super Bowl a few years ago when, let's see, I think it was Seattle and Denver. And right at the very beginning, a little miscommunication between the quarterback and center on the very first play of the game, and the ball was over the quarterback's head and out the window. 2 points. And for Denver, it just got worse after that. And what's sad is our youngest son is not a hard problem. He would not answer my calls. So I grabbed his phone and called him. He answered. And first thing I said, so I said hi, he said, "What are you doing on the phone?" I don't know if you, I'm not going to sing it, but I'm going to say the words. And from a very popular TV show, I'm going to see if you can figure out who it is. It says, "It's making your way in a world today that takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see or trouble are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name." Do you know that? Cheers. Cheers, yes. But when you look at those words, shouldn't the church be like that? Shouldn't, that's why I was thinking about this week. The church should be like this. Those words are true. But like I said, it's said it's written on the heart. It's said about God's church. The Psalm of David reminds us that one of the best investments that we can make is an investment in other people. We need to be friends. Kind of like they were at Cheers. We need to invest in people because it gives us a return. It gives us dividends on a wise investment, but the very best investment that we could ever make is not financial. It's in everybody else. We need to make investments in our relationships. I really got thinking about that this week with what's going on over in Afghanistan. And our third son, Joe, that's where he got hurt at. And he served a year over there. And my other son spent 2 tours in Iraq. And Joe had a tour in Iraq too. And these friends that they made over there, these are friends that they can count on. I know both boys knew that while they were down in Congo, they were attacking counts on the young men that were with them. The bad thing is, here in this world, we seem to want to accumulate more physical things than we do spiritual things. The late Malcolm Forbes said, "He who dies with the most toys wins." Now that he has passed away, I have a real suspicion that he probably thinks a little differently about that now. But we spend all our life trying to get more and more. I guarantee that you never feel fulfilled. I've talked to Rachel. That made great success in their lives. And you know, they're always looking for something else. They talk about how they're always driven for more and more and more. But you know what? They're never satisfied. They never find no happiness. And we, as Christians, if we don't look at our faces, we're going to find happiness. In fact, what we need is guardrail on this road that we get on when we become a Christian. That keeps us on the right path. We need to focus on building relationships, making friends, and more importantly, being a friend to others. Unfortunately, one of these things that people will sometimes share with you and me is this: I don't have very many friends. I hear that all the time. No, for a lot of us here have said that. I can tell Dave about being a pastor is a lonely job. Pastors don't have many friends because the one thing I was a pastor will be watching everything you do, right? Make sure you're not saying something mean about somebody. You got to watch your language and everything. But unfortunately, one thing people will sometimes share to me is true. I just don't have very many friends. Well, Proverbs 18:24 says this: a man who has friends must himself be friendly. Now let's look at our scripture this morning. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9 through 12. In fact, the little heading right here for this section is called the value of a friend. It says two are better than one, because they have a good reward for the labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, the two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. There's four things that we're going to talk about this morning as we go through here. The first one is a real friend picks you up when you fall down. That's our verse 10 where it says, where if they fall, one will lift up his companion. So woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he will have no one to help him up. Most of us have a lot of people in our lives that we would call acquaintances. I guarantee you that's a long list. If you were born and raised here in Turpin, you got several hundred people that you're acquainted with. And that could be, like I said, that's a long list. But how about friends? Real friends is usually a very short list. Now, if you don't know the difference between a friend and an acquaintance, here's how you figure it out. Get in trouble. You'll find out real quick who your friends and who your acquaintances are. The ones that are your friends are the ones who are still there with you. The ones that aren't are the acquaintances. A real friend is the kind of person you can call on at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell them that you need help, and they don't ask why, they just show up. That's a friend. Psalm 70:70 says, a friend loves at all times. I don't know, especially if I've got those early morning phone calls. Remember Montana, one of the millwrights I work with, they have become really good friends. And he called me about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and said that he's running a pickup off the dirt road. And he's in the snow bank, he couldn't get out. Well, if I bring my four-wheeler across the burden and pull him out, he's sure I'll be right there. So I went out there, and here it is about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. We were hooking this thing up. It's 20 below zero, and it is cold, and he is buried. But we got him out. That's the difference between friend and acquaintance. I knew I could talk to him if I should ever need him. He would be there. Second is a real friend warms us up when we're cold. It says again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Now, this is just not talking about keeping somebody physically warm. You know, you've seen it on, probably on movies or on TV shows like that, where, you know, somebody just not out there in the snow, they're frozen, they build a fire, and they stick in a sleeping bag, and then somebody comes and sleeping bag with them and help warm them up, and it does work. But that's not always what we're looking for. When I say we're often live in a very cold world, you look at what today is, it's not only in our country, but you look around the world. There's not a whole lot of love out there. There's a lot of coldness towards each other. You can no longer just disagree with somebody and still be friends. I remember in grade school, there was this great big oak tree on the corner of the playground. You ever disagree with somebody, you ran after school to meet at the oak tree. And you duke it out or wrestle or something like that, but I get you when you're done, you walk away friends. You don't do that today. If you disagree with somebody, you're not going to get ready to be called some nasty names. There's circumstances that we're going to be facing out there in the world. We're going to be facing a battle of how are we going to make things right in the world. And there is never a time when we need a friend more than we do right now. There are at least 3 times when we can really use a friend. When we're having relationship problems. When we're having health problems. And this one gets a lot of people right here. When we're having financial problems. So we got a good program here at this church. Where you go and meet friends. Celebrate recovery. It's a really good place. Our son Chris. I know he's okay with me telling this story because he told it in his church. After a second tour in Iraq, it was a very tough year for him. Well, he came back and he thought he wasn't the same kid he was when he was over there. He was nervous, he couldn't stand loud noises, he was jumpy, and so, like he told me, he started to self-medicate. He started drinking. Well, because of his wife and son, he got involved with Celebrate Recovery at the Baptist Church in Glenville, Virginia. And that group pulled him out of it. He made friends there. Friends that would listen to his problems. So sometimes when the friend tells us something, it's not so we give them advice or tell them how they're wrong. They just need somebody to talk to. So that being so, of that for how hard it is to counsel with people. As I spend 90% of my time listening. And it's really true. So I remember I would never forget that phone call from Chris. When he said he had something to admit to me. And that's when he told me the struggles he'd been going through. You know, from the outside you couldn't tell he's one of the issues. But he was. I think I just realized I didn't turn my mic on. You still heard me. Okay. And the neat thing is, his oldest daughter lives in Washington State, so he's raised by her mother. And Chris on the second marriage, well, both of our boys in the Army went through their second marriage, which was on his third. A lot of people are not built to be married to a military person. But Chris got a great wife now. And our granddaughter that lives in Washington talked to Pam last night and said that her and her fiance next year, a little middle of the week before they get married or after they get married, are going to move to Virginia.
which is where Dad is retiring to. You only got 2 years left to retire. That's also where her Uncle Joe is at. He's medically retired from the Army. And this is a girl that has not been raised in the church by her mother. And to me, that's exciting to hear that she wanted to be there close to her dad and uncle. And the thing is, not like she'll be surprised by the way they live, because she knows. But she also wants to spend time with her 2 younger siblings, which she doesn't see very often. The third thing I want to look at is a real friend will fight for us and our reputation. Verse 12 says, no one may be overpowered by another. 2 can withstand him. When these words were written down by Solomon, it's really kind of a military strategy. Back then, all combat was hand to hand. They had swords, they fought with swords and spears. So one of the things they would do is they would team up with a friend of theirs, and they would stand back to back as they fought. That way they knew that they had a friend, somebody they could trust to cover the back. A real friend does not stab you in your back, but they will guard your back. A real friend will not put up with gossip about you. If somebody's talking about a friend, he's going to set them straight. Now, what is the definition of gossip? Gossip is when someone says something bad or something unkind about someone who is not present, whether it is true or not. And unfortunately, there's a lot of gossip in the world now. With social media, it's easy to talk about people. Fourth, a real friend is committed to helping you grow spiritually. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. So what? When you have a good friend, it's just like iron. You sharpen iron with iron, and good friends will sharpen each other. That is probably the greatest gift that we can give somebody, is to be their friend, and where we sharpen ourselves with each other. But the greatest gift that you give anybody, especially a good friend if you haven't already done it, is to invite them to start a relationship with Jesus Christ. Now it says here that friends help sharpen us, and we also help sharpen them. The writer here is really using a picture of a blacksmith of who's making the sword. You ever watch, they actually got TV shows about this now too, about making knives and swords. If you watch, it takes a long time to make a good sword. Now he takes his hammer and a piece of iron, he has his fire there. He places, takes out the fire and puts on the anvil, and he goes to work on it. And slowly, very slowly, it starts to take the shape of the sword. That is a job I can never do. I'll tell you, I don't have the patience to do something like that. I don't even have the patience to sit down and do a crossword puzzle. And I certainly don't have the patience to give one of those 500-piece puzzles to put together. I got caught one time with my pocket knife out, trimming the pieces so they fit together. I wanted not to touch it anymore. But they fit. Now, most of us, when we listen to these 4 characteristics of a friend, we find ourselves thinking, would it be nice to have a friend like this? A friend that I knew would have my back. A friend I knew would help keep me warm. A friend that would defend me even if I wasn't there. Well, we can have friends like that, and we can be friends like that. Proverbs 18:24 says, a man who has friends must himself be friendly. In other words, it's not a one-way street. You can't expect people to be your friend if you're not a friend back to them. The first African American who played Major League Baseball was Jackie Robinson. Breaking baseball's color barrier was extremely difficult. The crowd often gave him a hard time. Well, one day when he was playing in Brooklyn, he committed an error. His own fans started to yell at him. As he said he stood there on second base, the shortstop, a man named Pee Wee Reese, came over and stood next to him. And as a show of support, he put his arm around Jackie Robinson and then faced the crowd. He said the crowd got quiet. Jackie Robinson said later that one demonstration of friendship probably saved his major league career. Peter Reese didn't say anything. He just walked over, put his arm around Jackie Robinson, and was his friend. There's so many people in the world today that need a friend like that. There's a lot of us that need a friend like that. Everybody runs into trouble sometimes where you need somebody to talk to. So today, I want to challenge everybody with something. Be a good friend to somebody. Be there for them when they need you, without being judgmental. Just be there. No, in the world today, there's a tendency that people always think about themselves. That's not good. So again, be a friend to somebody. I guarantee the reward will be great. So we see this morning in verse 9, a friend can help someone succeed in life. In verse 10, you can help someone up who has no one to help them. You know, being the treasurer for the Ministry of Life, I can do that sometimes. People come in with financial troubles. Sometimes they need help with medication. There have been times we've helped them out with paying a doctor's bill or a dental bill to help them out a little bit. Verse 11, you can offer warmth to someone who feels left out and cold. A person that's going through a trial in their life can be extremely lonely if they don't have a friend that they can talk to. Not somebody that can judge, but somebody that will listen to them. And in verse 12, we saw you can fight and defend someone's integrity when they can't. A man has friends must show himself friendly. That's the key to it. To have friends, we have to be friendly. If you're an old grunt that walks around town, you're not going to have very many friends. But if you're friendly to people, you can have a lot of friends. I guarantee you having a lot of friends is a whole lot better than having a lot of acquaintances. If you made a list of everybody that you knew, and you went down there and you highlighted the ones that you knew you could call when you had a problem, you'll find out that the list will be very long, but the ones that you highlighted is very short. Dr. Chuck Swindoll tells this story. You know, I didn't know it until I found the story that Chuck Swindoll was actually a Marine. They said, an old Marine buddy of mine came to know Christ after he was discharged. Now, we need to go background on that real quick. Dr. Swindoll was really surprised because here's how he described his friend. He said he cursed loud, fought hard, chased women, drank heavily, loved war, and hated church. And then Dr. Swindoll continues. A number of months ago, I ran into this fellow, and after we talked a while, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, you know, Chuck, the only thing I still miss in that old fellowship I used to have with all the guys at the bar, he said, I can't find anything like that with Christians. I no longer have a place to admit my faults and talk about my battles where someone will frown at me and preach at me. That was his friend's idea was a church. I guess he went to a church where if he tried to talk about his past or his trouble, somebody would judge him for it. But while I was looking through this, also read something else that was disturbing. Is that the neighborhood bar is possibly the best counterfeit there is to the fellowship Christ wants us to have in the church. It's an invitation, dispensing liquor instead of grace, escape rather than reality, but it's a permissive, accepting, and inclusive friend fellowship. You can tell people your secrets, and they don't tell others. The bar flourishes not because most people are alcoholics, but because God has put into the human heart the desire to know and to be known, to love and to be loved. And so many seek a counterfeit at the price of a few drinks. I believe that Christ wants His church to be like that, without the alcohol. A fellowship where people can come in and say, you know what? I'm suffering. I feel like I'm all beat up. I feel like I'm sinking. I've had it. I can't take it anymore. That's what Christ expects of churches, to take people like that and love them. Be their friend. So the greatest gift that any of us can give a person is first to invite them into a relationship with Christ. And second, to be a friend, a true friend to them. I'd almost bet that everyone was in here at one time or another was invited to church by somebody, a friend or a relative, or maybe one of the young ones. Maybe they were drugged to church. But that needs to be done sometimes too. I told somebody one time I was drugged when I was a child. I was drugged to church, I was drugged to grandma's house. The definition of friend again is that a real friend is someone who knows all your faults, knows everything that's wrong with you, but loves you anyway. And I got to thinking about this week of what happened over in Afghanistan. About those 13 young men who gave their lives for each other. But you know what? They also gave their lives for people they didn't even know. That's true love, isn't it? But these 13 young men that died together, I'm sure there's some strong friendships there. One thing you find is in the military, you build very strong relationships. Unfortunately, most of them end when one of you gets out of the military. But while you're in there, you only see one color, and that's green. At least in the years I was in, we wore, which we called the uniform triple suits, because they were all grass green. But I had friends that I could count on, and they could count on me. So today, if you're here and you're looking for a friend, I've got somebody I want to introduce you to. That's Jesus Christ. If you never got into a friendship with Him, I invite you to do that today. So if you would, please stand with me as we have our invitation.